Hello, bird nerds. This is something new but old. We're coming back. We're not only welcoming bird nerds, we're going to talk to wildlife photography enthusiasts and total gearhead nerds. I'm Grant Williams. I present the Bird Emergency podcast and the various live streams and interviews that we do for insane bird nerds. I'm joined by Nicolas Rakotopare. Now, did I get the accent right? Because I don't know if you saw Nick. Nick's a working wildlife photographer. One of my go-to gurus when I'm asking for any sort of camera advice and gear advice, which we're going to get to shortly. But Nick, I got called out for getting an accent wrong and then talking about it, and the accent in a what's the right terminology? A foreign name, a non-Anglo name in Australia. So
I think that's about right. You did pronounce the name right as far as the English pronunciation of my Malagasy last name goes. Yes, it's that's how it's supposed to be pronounced.
Now, thanks for dropping that in. By way of introduction, Nick is a working photographer, earning his living from taking snaps, and I know that's a very lax way to describe really good images of animals and landscapes. So, Nick, can you give us a brief introduction to yourself and your career? And hey, let's start with Malagasy background.
Well, we're starting all the way back then. Wow, that's going to be a 12-series podcast, I think. All right. So my name is Nicolas Rakotopare. As you said, I am a conservation and nature photographer and filmmaker. And basically, yes, as some people might have recognized, or maybe not from my last name, I have Malagasy origins. I was born and grew up in Madagascar. And a lot of my family is still there. And amongst other part of the family who's scattered across the globe. That's why my accent might be a bit funny sometimes. And I moved to Australia about 13 years ago. And I did my science degree here in conservation biology and ecology. I did a few years working as an ecologist, which I really love and enjoy. But I've always had a camera in my hands, always. And I've always documented my life. I got my first camera, an old film camera, when I was 14, if my memory is right. And I've always, it's a compulsive thing. I just documenting my life. So it didn't start straight away onto the wildlife and the nature side of thing. But I've always done that. And when I moved to Australia 13 years ago and did my degree in science and ecology, that's when things really started to shape up for me. And when I really realized that there was potential for a lot of good to be done, both in photos and videos, and in that realm, in the realm of nature, conservation, and all the things, on a lot of field work for university projects and things. I was always the one with the camera in hand, photographing both the animals and the people looking at the animals. And every time I would come back, I would always get the teachers, the universities, the staff, everyone being like, "Oh, there's some great images. We need this for that. We need this for that." Or then it's like, "Oh," the teachers would put me in touch with NGOs that needed photos, that sort of stuff. And that's when I sort of realized there's really something special in there. And it's sort of like transitioned slowly from like pure ecology into pure imagery of nature and ecology, really. And that's what I do now. I film critters. I film the people who like study and protect the critters, and I also photograph them as well. So photograph the critters. So yeah, what you said was basically accurate. Plus video. Video is a big part of what I do as well.
We'll sort of talk about the different choices and how you have to work when you are trying to do video and stills in the same location at the same time. But where did you do your university study, Nick?
I did that at Griffith University on Ugambe country on the Gold Coast.
And did you go like straight through, like, or did you have some breaks, be they enforced or by choice, and do some? The point of asking that is were you developing your photo skills and sometimes doing photography work, or just improving your skills and not attending your classes?
To answer that question, we'll step just a few years before I arrived to Australia, because that's when I really started doing some professional work on the side. So before I studied Ecology and Conservation Biology, I was studying software engineering in Paris. So I moved away from Reunion Island, which is next to Madagascar, which is where I finished high school. And the degree I wanted to do in software engineering didn't exist on the island, so I went to Paris to do it. But that's when the first sort of digital revolution started. Until then, even in the family, we had some very, very basic digital cameras. Most of my dad's like family photos and everything were on film. And but then the digital world started like expanding and changing. You started having entry-level digital cameras that were actually quite good, and you could use and do a lot of things with. Doing the Canon for me was the 350D. So their first, I believe that was their third iteration of that series, and it worked really well. I bought that, and then on the side of doing my software engineering classes and things like that, that's more when what you described happened, which the photography and things started taking over my life to the point that the software engineering aspect of things was sometimes, if it wasn't something that really interested me, if, for example, like robotics, I've never been good at coding for robots, and so any robotics class, you would most likely find me taking photos instead of being in the robotics class. You know, it's been long enough that now I can say that I can't say the truth. But yes, that's when I really started photographing. Again, it wasn't wildlife to start with, but I have this passion for creating images, and I was helping friends in studios. I was borrowing lenses, any small sort of photography or job or opportunity. There was a skate convention down the road. I would go down and photograph that. And then I started photographing portraits and concerts for a small web magazine for rock music. And so I was going to the events and photographing there. I learned a lot about how to deal with poor light, which in hindsight was a great introduction to professional photography, because it applies very well in most of the time. When I'm in rainforest, there is not a lot of lights and all those sort of things. Everything is a skill in photography. Like whatever photography you do, you can apply the skill to another thing. I've done cooking, like food photography as well over here and there. Like there's always something very interesting to me in a photography style that you can apply to wildlife and vice versa. So yeah, so that's just going back a bit to the beginning when I was in Paris doing that, but then I moved to Australia. But even then, it's funny when I look back through some of the archives. I was always photographing. Paris, it's not a biodiversity hotspot, but every time I was in the park having a coffee or something, I was always intrigued and interested in the wildlife, and I was always photographing the herons, the starlings, anything that was around. I would photograph, and even before that, when I was in high school, there's often chameleons and things like that in the school. So I would always photograph the chameleons.
What? I hope you've noticed an improvement in the sound too, Nick. While I was good, yes, while I was playing around with all of the images, getting ready for today, I forgot to switch a setting back. But dear listener, I hope we're sounding better now. Nick, what was the best band you ever photographed? Just while I digress.
Best in terms of it's a very subjective question.
I know that's a very subjective question that requires. requires
Wow.
you to
Okay.
pour out your heart?
Wow. Because in terms of, I'll give two, just for two different reasons. In terms of my favorites band I photographed, because I really liked their music, and it was their first gig in France, I think, ever at that time. Pendulum. It's a drum and bass
Oh, okay.
band.
Yeah.
And they had this incredible LED wall, and the atmosphere was just off the roof. It was honestly incredible. Like photographing that from the pit, it was awesome. But I think the band where I got so taken by the band that usually when you photograph like that, you have an accreditation, and you're not allowed to photograph the whole concert. There's only one person that's allowed that. It's usually the band's photographer, because of rights and everything. So everyone that's here for a magazine or like a publication like ours, therefore, you're allowed like 1, 2, 3 songs. It's depending on the venue, depending on this. But that specific band was called I'm From Barcelona. And it's a band that has, I think they had up to like 30 people playing on stage at the same time. It was just absolute madness. And some concerts, there were more people, less. But I was so taken and so in it, and they were so playful with the camera as well. They kept on coming over. I had to get some wide-angle shots of them looking down the lens. That at some point, I completely forgot about the rule. Like I literally forgot which song what was, and I literally felt my feet lift off the ground because one security guard came through the thing and picked me up by the collar to tell me that I've like overstepped my time and I need to get out of the photography pit now. So yeah, that's probably my 2 favorite bands I've ever photographed.
Now, the point of following up on photographing bands, I knew some people who were making a living photographing bands in the underground scene in Melbourne for a while, and it's a challenging environment because of the lighting that is applied in most concerts. So, was that a really good way for you to learn about light
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
absolutely, because cameras, and we're only talking like, I don't know, roughly 15 odd years ago, the camera technology has just increased. You can't compare what we're shooting back then with what's available now in terms of like low light and technology and everything. So yeah, it was great. It was a great school for that sort of things, because you had the pressure of time, only allowed 1, 2, or 3 songs, and you needed to get at least like 5 to a dozen publishable shots for the magazine or wherever you were shooting that for. So that's, like I said, there's always something good to take in any style of photography. And for me, like concert was just working on the pressure and really being like super quick and super analytical of your scene, because you walk in before the concert starts and you're already like looking, all right, the lights are here, this is that, they're going to come here, that's where the drummer is, I'm going to try and get here and then go my way there. You sort of like plan ahead a little bit, so that helps a lot as well of getting familiar with that, and then being like, all right, I have those 2 cameras, this one is absolutely shocking in low light, I'll try and wait for hopefully there is a part that has a bit more lights, and this and that. Same, we didn't have like the frame rates, which is how many photos per second the camera can take. Nothing like today. And I remember I was shooting mostly with a Canon 40D, which my memory was 6 frames per second, which was fast. I bought that because it was 6 frames per second, and it was it's awesome. It's nowadays most like a lot of the high end cameras do 30 images per second, so you would get a lot more photos to choose from, and better in low light and everything. But yeah, it was a great school to do that and learn in that sort of like high pressure, dark environment.
Well, let's sort of start to move through the running sheet and the questions that I'd prepared. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us, Nick, how would you describe you as a photographer and your style, and perhaps what you prefer to focus on, and what is your sort of current career aim? I mean, what jobs do you like to do? That's really
Okay.
what I'm asking you there.
All right. So, like I said, so I am a conservation filmmaker and photographer, foremost, and so in terms of the current career focus, I work freelance, and basically I do. Coming from a science background, and as you know, having worked for the threatened species recovery hub for many years, doing all the documentaries and assignments and things like that, I've built up a lot of contacts across that sort of science and research landscape on threatened species across Australia. So I do get people calling me back that I've met on those assignments, needing more photos, more videos, new projects coming up, new threatened species being listed and things like that. And that's probably what I like doing the most. In terms of going out on a project, on assignment, and photographing both the critter and the people working on it, whether it's like research, protection, and all that sort of like sphere. But because I like that dual aspect, and it comes back to the conservation biology, which has a huge human element in it, and it's always very interesting to see. And I love meeting the people that have dedicated their life to protect or research that specific animal or ecosystem, and often like I benefit hugely from like talking and having that aspect to document as well, because then it helps me a lot gathering a better understanding of the biology of that animal, so then I can go on and photograph the animal, and because sometimes shots wouldn't happen without the knowledge, especially when it is a short amount of times and things like that. As an example, I would give you, because that's a shoot I did semi-recently that worked exactly like that. I did a video on the chakura, which is the great desert skink, and I'd never seen that species before, but I had some shots in my head, and I was like, when I would like a shot of one. They're a social reptile, and they often come out at the end of the day near their like communal burrow system, a bit like sort of smaller system than wombats, but similar. And they would come out, and I would love like a photo of one at sunset sitting next to its burrow, and without the researchers being there and spending a week with them, I don't think I would have, in a week I would have gotten enough time to just by myself get that shot. So working with them, we got some great photos and footage of that species for that specific video, and to build onto to build around what they needed for their sort of awareness on the threatened species. And
can I ask you, Nick, on that point? This is sort of where I would have hoped to have got to a bit down the track, but when you go and do a shoot for a client, you mentioned the Threatened Species Hub, but say it's a magazine or maybe it's a, I don't know, local tourism body or something that send you out somewhere. Who owns all of the footage that you take on that trip? Like if you've been paid from woe to go, from your front door all the way until you come home, and all the costs are borne by a client, do they own everything you take, or do they only own what you give them, what you like polish up and present to them?
It's on a. Oh, you still here?
Yeah.
Okay,
We're just focused on you because you're the expert.
Yep. Look, that's a question that could be a whole Photography Friday in itself. But basically, it's a project to project basis. People have different budgets, different needs, and different views. Some people will pay just for like more in video. They will pay for a finished product. And there's a specific fee that we agree on for a finished product. That does not entitle them to have every single clip you took. They just trust you as the person to make the best. And if they're happy with your editing, that's what they want. But they do not own that. If they want to get all of that, usually you negotiate the different rates. for owning the things, but also like you own, even if someone sends you out and pays for you to shoot something, you still own the copyright. If you want to transfer the copyright to them, that's another discussion as well. So there is pathways for everything. Everything is different. Everything is absolutely different. It's depending on your contract, depending what you do, depending how much people are wanting to pay, depending like what they need the image for. Often tourism body will, from what I can see with my friends, it's very different. I've helped friends on tourism campaigns a few years ago, and all those jobs were they paid that specific person I was assisting. I was like sort of second shooter, getting extra content for them as well. But basically, they agreed on, we want that output, we want that video for that long on that topic with you choose the best thing, you make it work, it looks nice. But all they had and they could use was that specific video, and it was already pre-agreed where the video was going to be used, because that also has to come into a mix. What going to be the usage? What's going to be? It's all like licensing. It's a huge thing. We could talk about it for hours. But to answer your question simply, it varies. It's very, very varied according to, again, it's something that you discuss at the contract stage of things.
So it's very different to, say, if you are creating as a staff writer or a musician signed to a label or publishing company or something, where all of your output for a period of time is owned by the man. So how hard is it to learn what the boundaries are, Nick, for how much material you should be handing over? Like, is there a tendency when you're beginning? And that's the standpoint I come from. So viewers, welcome, by the way. Feel free to put a comment or a question in. That's kind of why we're doing it. But I come from an absolute beginner's point of view, but I hope to be able to earn some money or to get some benefits through adding photography to what I do by having people pay for me to go places and talk about stuff and maybe host events and whatnot. But how hard is it to learn? How much to give away, Nick?
Oh, that's something. It's nowhere in the books. And again, because I am self-taught in all that area, I've never done a photography class or a filmmaking class, and my background is in ecology. But it's something that you learn. You learn along the way. There is now really good resources everywhere online. People are getting very transparent with how things work and how things should be priced. There are grids that you can sort of look at. I believe the AIPP used to have like the Australian Institute of Professional Photographers, I believe. They used to have a great sort of like a grid of some like a usual rates that should be done for a specific job. But again, this is just a guideline because this will depend entirely on you, your relationship with the client. There's so many things that come into play for that. It's you're gonna go and you're gonna shoot for them, but like who is them? What are they doing? What is the end use of the image? That's something you have to think about. Like, am I shooting for a multinational company which will have the images used forever and ever, huge and make them millions, or am I filming or shooting for this NGO which I love the ethos? They don't have a huge budget. You're trying to work with them and sort of like you have this at a reduced rate, but that's all I can give you. Or sometimes you might do something differently because you want that client to be a repeat client, and or again you have a really good relationship, or you have a terrible relationship and you just like, I want to be done with that client and not hear about them anymore. There is no one answer to do that, but there is always. I often get people asking me as well, about like working for free and everything, and it's so depending on the context, the person's sort of situation. Like in general, it is hard to be paid for photos and videos and things like that. A lot, very often, people I would say everyone not, but like a lot of people, think it's just pressing a button, and it shouldn't have such a value on media like that. But it is way more than that. But that doesn't preclude me or people to do things either like at a very reduced rate, or when you're starting for free. But if you do it for free, you really have to make sure there is those elements of like, I have a good relationship, and this is really beneficial to me. It has to be 200% beneficial to you to do that. You can't just do it and it's not going to take you anywhere, because then you're just making someone else money and you will be stuck in that area. So you really have to be careful and picky about those moments you do that.
Now, before we get onto gear, because I'm sure a lot of people are going to want to know all about your rig, and we'll probably come back to some of these points, but I want to ask you a cheeky question, because we've never talked about this before, but this is something that people have asked me from a beginner point of view about getting into photography. What's the kind of rate? Is there an hourly rate, if you're working out how long a project might take you or should take you, that you should never, ever go below?
Again, I'm going to go no, because like we've just discussed, everything is there is so much that comes into play. It's impossible. It's impossible to put a exact value. It's depending if it's, if you're sitting down, you're like, all right, I'm going to be a photographer now. It's going to be my main source of income. And this is how much I need to make a year to make it viable. This is all my expenses and everything. But it's different than someone who will be like, well, this is something I want to do, but only like a third of the time. And so it's so different. There is, like I said, if you're good at what you do and you're confident, all I can say is don't sell yourself like short. Really, sometimes a no can trigger more opportunities down the road than just saying yes at a rate that is not viable, and then you will not enjoy. You'll be burnt. You'll not be able to live out of like your talent and your skill. So there is no actual, again, that's all like my personal like opinion, but there is no exact value. Same if a job is really close to you, like really like something, that down the road, something you can get by with, like sort of something less if you really want to work with that person, because it's there's the convenience factor of it. But if you have to drive 3 days to get to that place, then it's probably not a good idea to really go into it. But it's a good question, because I get it a lot, and all I can give people is just those dot points to like think about all those things. What is it to you, and then go from there, and have a look. I think it's a bit easier as well. I get really good advice from friends that work in the wedding and portrait industry. They seem to really have like sort of a good understanding of like how to deal with that sort of things and how it works. And they always like good value when I have a question on that.
Well, I'm guessing, Nick, that people who are working in the wedding and portrait industry are probably working on a higher hourly rate than somebody working in wildlife photography, just simply because of the nature of the clients and the ongoing demand. So you need to sort of set your expectations a little bit lower, shall we say.
Absolutely, but they're still great, because, as you said, they have such an ongoing demand in their area of photography that they all become really good at that aspect of photography. And although yes, the rates are much higher than in the nature sort of area. There are still great value in terms of information and how to approach things. Like I said, how to look at your project, what you want to do, like what you want to do out of it, looking at what's the, how much do you think your solution to that person's problem is worth. As a summary, someone is like, I need images for that specific purpose, and you sort of, there's lots of different things like that how you can approach, and not everything works for everyone, but it's always good to me to have, over the years, reverting to people that work in that industry, always have good advice.
Now, last question that's totally off script. Before we get to gear, do you have an advantage in your chosen subject area of wildlife and conservation by actually being a trained scientist over someone who may be an amazing technical photographer? Like, do you win jobs because you've got that background in rooted in science?
Absolutely, and I've had that's sort of like my niche, and I've had a lot of discussions with clients and things afterwards, and especially people that became repeat clients or repeat projects and things, because it does help when it's so specific, documenting a biodiversity survey of a specific area. You might, as you said, you might have a very good photographer that's very technically proficient, but has no idea about the subject, has no idea about the critics that are going to be for what's going to happen. And so what helped me a lot is I have that rapport straight away. Someone calls me like, we're doing a biodiversity survey, we need images, we're going to be catching, or we're doing a quoll survey, and I know that will entail most likely some cage trapping. I know what cage trapping is, what it looks like. I know what sort of images you can get out of that, and I know it helps a lot, especially with that, because you know exactly, you and the person have the same expectation and knowledge of what's possible or not. It's happened to us over the years when we're working with some broadcast producers that weren't on location and not very well versed into the fauna and the critters, and asking for shots that were absolutely impossible, asking for like nocturnal marsupials to be out in the middle of the day for long periods of time and things, and the fact that I know the species, I know how it works, I know about how people care for it, like everything around it has really helped me in that specific example, like reasoning with a producer, being like, all you have here is impossible to get, and it would be actually detrimental to the story because it's showing something that's completely wrong, and telling that person, this is how we're going to shoot, this is the different areas we'll get to shoot, this is the different shot list we'll provide, and it will work in the end. It's always worked. It's never had an issue where it actually didn't work in the end, but it's just that, yeah, to go back to your question, it is a massive advantage. It's the same to being ready to. We've had a long time ago some filmmakers that sort of had issues with or photographers working in remote conditions, not knowing how to deal gear-wise with 7 days camping in the Pilbara, for example. Not being able to sort of prepare themselves for 7 days. What's the power situation going to be like? How are we going to deal with this? And it's all the things are the skills go from science and like field biology to photography and wildlife photography. It sort of creates that area where I can talk. And even on the field, it creates good relationships with the people I film and photograph, because they know that we speak the same language, and they can trust me, and that's how I sort of, you talk about your style of photography, and again, that's slightly separate to the wildlife because it's documenting people who study the wildlife. But I really try and go with that because I know what's going on, and I know what to expect, and I know, all right, we're going spotlighting now. This is the sort of shot. This is how the light is going to be, and that sort of stuff. I feel like I'm less intrusive than someone that would have like no idea, because I know exactly like what I want, what I need, and what's going to work. and through that, it's I think we have really good times on the field with the people I photograph and all that knowledge. And we can talk about the species as well that we've seen. We can talk about the work, what animal we've tagged, and all that sort of things. It just creates this sort of niche for me to be able to work efficiently and positively with all that whole nature and science sphere.
You're out there with your tribe.
That's it. Yeah. Out there with people that are like-minded, with people that are doing incredible work, and through that, it just makes and that helps a lot because it's when I used to tutor field biology, and you would get first-year students on their first field trip ever, which is very different than their annual camping trip with their families and things like that, and I used to tell them, the attitude is about half the work. If you're positive and things, everything sort of will follow. And yes, it is difficult condition, and it's the same. And it's the same. I've had shoots in areas where you woke up in the morning, it was already 39 degrees at 7 a.m. You had slept with a fair few. You shared your tent with a lot of centipedes. As soon as you went out, you had about 1 million flies going up your nostrils. And when the fly would take a break, all the sweat bees would come around. And I've had some very, very funny moments trying to photograph people and trying to be silent, filming while you have flies all up your nose and ears and your eyes, because I can't always wear the net because it's hard to see the screen sometimes. So it's all of those things. If you're ready and you know what's going on and you're used to it, makes it easier for everyone to do that.
All right, well, we're just about to leap into gear. But, right. Nick, are you responsible for some of those fantastic quoll release videos that get about on social media?
There is a fair few. I have done a fair few myself. It might be, might not. I'm not sure which ones, but I have done a lot of animal release. It's a great shot, and it's something that's really well done on mobile phones as well. So I used to do some classes for scientists, workshops on how to sort of the tips and tricks of the trade to get good shots on your mobile phone, because I can't be everywhere all the time. And those slow motion release shots are an absolute delight. Usually they're great. Unless you have a quoll that's decided to zigzag behind every single one of your cameras, and then stop at the edge of its den, look at you, and go slowly back in. It was a very interesting experience. Yeah, I had 3 cameras rolling, and I had exactly 0 seconds to show 4 on that one. But that's how it is sometimes.
Quoll. You just can't get enough quoll.
Quolls, incredible, and yeah, incredible animals. Still learning. I'm still learning so much about them, but and how a difference they can be. I've filmed and photographed northern quolls in the Pilbara, which were quite the aggressive critters coming out of getting them out of the traps and thing. Had to be very careful. Whereas the same species, but in North Queensland, I was told, they're the ones that they get the volunteers to train on because they're so relaxed, and I didn't believe it until I saw it, and I've never seen a quoll so relaxed in my life. So yeah, they're fascinating animals. All the Aussie critters are absolutely fascinating.
All right, well, we've been promising it. Let's get into gear, Nick. Which one of your workhorses do you want to start with?
All right. Well, I'll start with my workhorse because I told you to get 2 images, but one is current, one is not yet. So my workhorse, and that's the camera I've now been using 4.5 years, is the Canon 1DX Mark II. That's the one that's popping up on the screen.
And I didn't put the X on it, so that's my mistake. The EOS 1DX Mark II.
Mark II, yeah. So that's my workhorse. It's been my workhorse for 4.5 years. I've used a range of cameras, but that's the one that's done the most for me. So I've used cinema cameras, I've used smaller mirrorless cameras as well, like in between. But this just, when it came out, things are different now. So I'm just going back to the 4.5 years. When it came out, was the best sort of hybrid, which means like great at photo and video in a small package camera. And the reason I chose that one is because it's people nickname it nickname the 1D series the tanks. They're absolutely like little bricks. They're very, very rugged camera. They're very reliable, and they're very fast. And I could get great video footage as well as photo, because that's an aspect of my work that's also been only been possible through the changes in sort of the photography and filmmaking industry, that now you can get excellent video capabilities in small bodies like that. And so I chose that one because it could do everything. It could do my sort of like conservation photojournalist and video journalist work as well as my wildlife photography. It's sort of like all in one indestructible package, and that's why I chose that one back then. It also, when it came out, it was one of the two, I believe, only cameras which could do 4K 60 frames per second, which is 4K with a little bit of slow motion, half slow motion in the camera, without any need of any external thing. And that's why I bought it, because it just ticked all these boxes. There's nothing to me. To me, the name of the game for gear for my work is reliability. It doesn't matter if it's not like the latest, but and I'm very, very specific, very picky. I kept it for 4.5 years. I could have changed something in between, but I kept that one because it just works. It doesn't skip a beat. It's never skipped a beat. It doesn't not matter how hot it was, how cold, how wet, it just works. And that's something that I really value over everything.
Now, with that hand grip on it and the body casing, it looks kind of heavy. How much does it weigh?
If my memory is right, I think it's 1.4 kilos, I believe.
Okay. So, well, it's pretty hefty. So by the time you whack a big lens on it,
1 kilo, 1.5 kilo, yeah.
That's 1.5 kilos. So by the time you put a big lens on it, you're talking, and a strap, and then carrying your tripods and everything, you're talking, probably 3 or 4 kilos, yep, just in the gears. So
easy. The tripod's heavier than 3 kilos. Yes.
Yeah. So, you said it's really, really rugged. I'm guessing it's totally weather sealed.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So it's an absolute workhorse and a beast. How long does is the battery capacity of it, and how and importantly, how long does it take to charge?
It's very depending if you're shooting video or not, if you're doing long sequences or short clips and things. But it's long. It's long. I can't remember. I believe the battery is rated for 1,200 shots. Again, it's maybe my memory is tricking me because I haven't looked at it. But the simple way to answer is that it is very sufficient, very, very sufficient. I have 2 batteries for it, and I've never needed much more than that, because I've always had some sort of as well extra power supply, something alongside with me where I could charge. But I believe it's over 1,000 image on a charge in terms of still images.
And is there a limitation of how long you can take a continuous video?
There is a software limitation which people were cranky at Canon for a long time. A lot of the cameras originally, when they started doing video, had a limitation where they would stop your recording at 29 minutes and 59 seconds. The reason for that is, I believe it stemmed from on the European markets, if a digital product that could record video could record longer than 30 minutes, it was classified as a dedicated video camera, and therefore the tax.
So there was a different tax. It cost more money.
Tax. And so, and that doesn't exist anymore to my knowledge. So a lot of the cameras now, you can record, and it just records until either the battery dies, either the card is full, or either it overheats.
Okay, so I always thought that it was because of the overheating issue, but if it was an
Nowadays,
but for some models it could be an artificial constraint because of
absolutely, yeah,
uh,
yeah.
um,
Literally, it stops recording. You press record again, and you're good to go for another 29 minutes and 59 seconds.
so does that mean someone's worked out a software hack for most of the popular models to get around that?
But I believe it's just that now that tax doesn't exist anymore.
They just don't.
Because
They just don't have it.
it's such a sort of integrated video photo world on the cameras and things. So that's why that tax didn't exist, and a lot of cameras continued stopped doing that, stopped recording. Canon continued for a little bit longer than everyone else for some reason, but yeah, on the newer models and the one I'll talk about a bit later, there is no limit. It's only limited by either space, battery, or heat.
Well, should we talk about the other body, or should we talk about some lenses?
We'll
How
talk
about we
about
do
the lenses,
let's
and then I'll talk to you about the
go back to the body. Okay, so okay, well, let's start with the first one you told me about.
this one. Well, this is very simple. That lens, if I had to just have one lens for the rest of my life, it would be that one. And I often get like people like looking at me with big eyes. They're very surprised. To me, that's again, because I shoot Canon. Every brand is different, so I'll just stick with that on this one. And this is for my specific work and anyone doing science communications and science media. This is a hidden gem. This is an absolute hidden gem. It was introduced to me many years ago by a friend who works in time lapse and hyperlapse photography. For the same reason, he was like, that lens is so underrated, and but it's great for me for different reasons that it's great for him. But basically, it's an L lens, as you can see with the red ring. It's weather sealed, has really good optics. But what it has, it's also like on the sort of, again, I'm going to say cheap. Everyone has a different like concept of cheap. It's a very subjective thing. But in terms of like how the price of lens, it's quite affordable. I think it's at the moment might have go back up a little bit. I'm not sure anymore. I bought that one so long ago, but you can probably find it for like less than $1,000. Yeah, around, yeah. Secondhand, even like less than that. But what's really handy and why that's my favorite lens, and if I only had to have one, I would just use that one. It has, it's hard to see like on the photo, but in the corner there is a small macro switch, and so basically you take the lens all the way to 70 mil, you enable that switch, and it does some magic with the optical formula inside, and you can get not 1-to-1 ratio, but you can get so close to your subjects. And it's absolutely amazing because for me, 24, great to set the scene, film the people, 70 to get up close. So I've got the whole range to get my wide shots, my medium shots, my tight shots. But then I often dealt with people holding small animals. It could be holding a small a delma. It could be anything, an antechinus, looking at the topaz, and I was able, without having to change the lens at all, to get all my shots from like my wide angles at 24 all the way to tiny shots filming things that were a few millimeters across, and always one lens. And that's why for me it's my absolute favorite lens. And it's also before nowadays a lot of the cameras have in-body image stabilization, which the DSLRs generation, like none of them have that. And so this 2470, it's an f4 lens, but it also was stabilized, which was very handy for me for video, whereas the 2.8 version wasn't stabilized back then. So it was a trade-off, sort of light versus stability. But that macro feature, I use it all the time. Last week I was photographing some orchids, and I don't have to get the macro out or anything. That's the one lens. It's great.
Fabulous. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about macro when we get there. But do you want to have a look at the other Canon lens next?
Yes. Yeah. All right, this one, the as we discussed before, Wikimedia was a bit cheeky. That is not the photo is mislabeled on the website. That's a 1635 2.8 on there, but the lens I have, as you've labeled correctly, is the 1635 f4, which is a great sort of complement to the lens I've just talked before. Again, it's an f4 lens, not the fastest, not the 2.8, but it makes it more affordable. Also, again, the reason of stabilization, it was at the time the only 1635 that was stabilized in the Canon range. So to me, it was great. I used that to get even wider shots, to do landscape shots, and it has a pretty small, so short minimum focusing distance for a wide angle, which is quite handy when you find the right critters. And I should have given you the image, but that I'm going to mention now. But recently, I won one category of a photo competition with a photo of a skink that was sitting on the buttress roots of trees in the rainforest in North Queensland. And I took that with that 1635, and it's great to be able to come slowly up close and then have it a wide angle shot with the animal small-ish in the frame and showing all its environment around it. So that's a reason why I liked that 1635 f4 as well. It's a great lens for that. Again, it's reliable, it's rugged, it's stabilized, and at f4 was amongst the more affordable ones.
Now, Nick, Naomi's been watching. This is what we do this for, so that we can help out with a good tip, and also maybe a bit of helping someone else perhaps with buyer's regret. I was watching a video yesterday, which was about webcams and which cameras to use for webcams, and this guy was on a live stream, and just about every question was, I bought such and such. What do you think about this? Everyone was wanting validation for their choices. So
90% of YouTube gear reviews are tailored towards validation or buyer's regret.
That's right. So, Naomi, I'm going to be a bit cheeky and say, I'm sure that there will be a suitable lens in the Nikon range. And Nick, we might introduce that this will be a semi-regular thing where Nick and I chat. Today we're talking about Nick's photography, but as we get down the track, we'll be bringing people on to talk about their photography using the benefit of Nick's experience and my inexperience. But we won't just be sitting with one brand choice, whatever. So I'll cast around for a fantastic Nikon or Nikon, which is correct, Nick.
Look, I'm English second language. I pronounce things very differently to a lot of people. I'm not sure what people use. I use them interchangeably. Whatever comes more naturally, I'll say.
You type it into Google and it's the same. It's the same word, no matter how you say it. So that's right. So Naomi, perhaps for the next time we get together, Nick, maybe we'll sort of match up something in the Nikon range that would roughly equate to what you're to what you're using. My ignorance, Nick, are they the same mount, the Canon and the Nikon are using?
No, completely different. Every camera has its own proprietary
mount system.
Proprietary mounts. Besides, the only ones that are interchangeable for a specific line are some Panasonics and Olympus have created something called the L Mount Alliance, and so you can lenses on that specific mount can be used on both brands. But to my knowledge, that's the only instance it's happened.
Yeah, that's where all the choices need to be made, don't they? And once you've made your choice,
in a time where we have a lot of choices, we have a lot of options, all great, all great. It's really when you get into like a specific sort of like bracket, there is no bad camera. There is just the right camera for you, for what you want to do, how much you want to invest, and what photography or filmmaking means to you. But we have so many options. It's awesome. I really like it.
Yeah, it's quite exciting, really, and for someone who is to introduce listeners to. I had made my choice about where I was going to go, but there's been a hiccup in that, which we can talk about right at the end. But the amount of equivocating and the amount of research and going and checking things and handling things and everything is it's painful because they're big ticket items. It's a big decision that I think anyone is making when they decide which system you're going to step into. So, but that's a whole nother episode. Do you want to talk about the macro this time?
Yes, if you have it. There you go. So that's quite an interesting one, because amongst my friend and things I'm renowned to use for that specific lens. For the reason is that it's Canon's original 100mm macro in the EF mount, which would be for the most of the current digital camera, bar the really, really recent one. So in the EF mount range, that lens came out in 1990. I have one from 1990. It has the absolute, I'm going to say it doesn't even really have autofocus. It's not stabilized. It's not an L lens. When you try and autofocus with it, it makes it, especially mine, because it's half broken. My friends always laugh. I was photographing frogs with them in North Queensland, and it's like, it makes this like whiny baby sound, just screaming, and it's horrible. But like most macro lenses, they're designed to be sharp. And in 1990, it doesn't matter that the lens is that old. It's extremely sharp. And when you get it right, it's just perfect. It's just not super convenient, because instead of having a nice autofocus, and then there you go, a comment from one of my friends that has experienced firsthand that absolutely horrendous noise that lens can produce. But yeah, it makes it more difficult. But then it's great. It's great optically. So I still use it, because I just like to use things all the way, really, until it's really completely unusable. And especially because pure macro photography is not part of my work, and so I prioritize the gear that is part of that is making money, and the macro photography per se isn't. So I just continue to use that, and it's done me well. It's in a lot of countries, and I think it's due to retire soon. And but yeah, it's always very fun shooting with it. It's people are always surprised, because again, optically it's great. So when it works, I can get very sharp, very good shots. And I get people asking me, "Oh, which lens do you like? Was that?" And it's like, it's an antique Canon. And a lot of people don't even know about that model, because it's that old. So yeah, it's really funny. It's always a good chat around that lens.
And of course, Jasmine has made the point that we were just talking about, that you have to virtually wed yourself to one system and stick with it, or else you have to trade everything out and jump onto a new one. So Jasmine's been Nikon, then Canon, and now with Sony. And really like to hear about your experiences with the Sony.
Oh, sorry, I can't hear you anymore, Grant.
You can't hear me at all.
It's just connection wise. It's dropping somewhere.
Okay.
It seems to be back. Maybe just a bit of a packet loss. Back we are, I believe.
I think. Are we back?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, I can hear. It was just like good. Really cut. Yeah. I didn't hear the last sentence you said.
Just mentioning that, as Jasmine had said, that you do have to go from one system into another system, into another system. It's very difficult to do the whole brand loyalty thing, but I had asked that I would be interested in Jasmine's experiences with the Sony system, which I think is called the APC system.
Well, the Sony sits. The AP, I think what you're mentioning, APS-C, is just it's a sensor size.
Okay,
and it's different. But the Sony has been like they started mirrorless like a little bit before everyone, and really went hard, and they produced some incredible camera. I've been like I said, so my main work courses and things are all around Canon, but I've used a lot of other cameras, and most of these other cameras were Sony's as well, because they work really well. They have some very specific things they do extremely well. And the Sony has you're talking about mounts before, Sony has the E-mounts. Sony has an incredible amount of like third-party lenses that you really good ones that you can put on the system. They're renowned for their low light capacity and things, they've really done some awesome things with cameras. And recently I've filmed a specific critter while I had the camera on loan from Sony, and it was just great timing because it was so dark. I would have never been able to get usable shots if I didn't have that dedicated low light video camera. And it was a very, very rare encounter that I've been trying to film that critter for a very, very, very long time.
Can you talk about that?
Oh yeah, I can. Yeah, I'm making a short, not sure exactly the format, but basically on a short film documentary on one of my urban parks. That's not too far from where I live, and because when I moved to Australia, I moved to the Gold Coast, and so that park has a bit of significance to me in the way that it's the first place I ever saw a kangaroo, koala, and it's quite a nice little patch of bush that has some like mangroves, some pine plantation, a small airport. And a lot of people go there for like a bit of jogging, but when you actually spend time there and look at things, and 30 years down the track, I've had some amazing encounters there, and there's one or two. So you have swamp wallabies. Swamp wallabies are usually dark color. But on South Stradbroke Island is part of the population that we call the golden morphs. They're completely like bright orange with a white face. They look nothing in terms of color like a regular swamp wallaby. And I've been trying to find those golden morph swamp wallaby in the park for a very long time. And lucky, not maybe like 3 months ago, I got to spend 1 hour with one of them in around corner of a trail, and it was awesome. It was very dark, but I was lucky to have that camera I had with me was dedicated to low light filming, and it sort of all just aligned for me. And I'm very excited to share that because, again, I love showing what's around in urban parks. We have so much. We're so lucky to some. It's an example. It's sort of exaggerated, but in some places around like urban parks or camping spot, we have more wildlife at a campground or a car park of some urban parks than you would find in a whole day in some forests in Europe in terms of pure like sort of larger things, biodiversity. It's quite incredible, and I've had some incredible sightings and moments. I have discovered firsthand how far a koala can leap in the air when he wants to go from one branch to another, and I was very, 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 very impressed. So that's the critter that I got some footage and I'm working on. I just need a bit more content of the different ecosystem because I really focused on around the Melaleuca swamps and sort of like open grassy eucalyptus areas, but I want to spend a bit more time in the mangroves now to document a little bit what lives in there, and then I'll make a short video showing people what's in their park.
Overseas viewers and listeners will probably be shocked to know how clumsy koalas are on the ground, but how amazingly agile they are in the trees. They look slow and dopey, but boy, when they want to move, they can move.
it wasn't quite as big, but it was just, to me, it was because I filmed it as well, and I was looking at it, and it was very reminiscent of, very reminiscent. It had the vibe of a lemur leaping. It wasn't as agile or anything, but it was very impressive, because I've seen a lot of koalas over the years, but that one, which was a few days before that encounter with the swamp wallaby, that encounter with that koala was the most exciting and most amazing encounter I've had with a koala, because when I first spotted it, it was just swapping trees. It was on the ground, and yeah, it was absolutely. And again, a bit of luck involved. I had the right gear with the right lens and the right everything at the right time, which doesn't always happen.
And tip for young players: do not stand directly below a koala. I will just tell you that one. Unless you are wearing a raincoat and a good plastic hat, because
any arboreal critter usually try and avoid.
Yeah, it very stinky. Now let's just make note. Jasmine loves her Sony's. Just got a second body, and I think that's what tends to happen. That you're happy with one. You get the next one, and then you start collecting lenses. Back to lenses. Oh, no, actually, before we get onto that one, Nick, for beginners, when would you choose and use a macro lens for what kind of work or pleasure compared to maybe a standard a standard size lens? Which one of your earlier lenses would you say to someone to start off with? I think it was this one, yeah?
This one, absolutely. Absolutely, okay. This one, yep.
Okay. When would you choose a macro lens? What sort of work would you be looking to do?
So when you're trying to show small things big, and so like lenses are sort of rated for like a ratio of how much they magnify things or represent things, and usually the most brands will have something on the 100 millimeter. Like, so Canon has a 100 millimeter macro. I think Nikon is a 105 macro. Sony is a 90 millimeter macro. And basically around it, all those macro lenses will help you think about an ant on the tip of a leaf or something. It's anything that's small. You want to get up close to it. And the good thing with the 100 mil as well, because you have some 60 millimeter macro, but when you have a longer focal length like the 100 mil, you can also be a little bit further away sometimes, like from specific things. So if you were photographing a frog with a small frog with a 100 mil macro, you wouldn't be right up close to it like that, because if you were that far off a frog. And for people that are listening, I'm roughly like showing, I don't know, like 5 centimeters from the frog, all you would get is the eye of the frog, basically. Yeah. So with 100 mil, it's nice. You can be about 40-60 centimeters away and get like a nice shot where the frog is big in the frame.
And for real beginners, I'm thinking of some of those sort of cliche shots, the droplet on running off a bit of sundew, that kind of photography, or where we're looking at grains of sand and things like that. That's macro kind of shots, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. Anything, yeah. But yeah, you can summarize with anything that's tiny that you want to like show small things. That's the idea.
Plant flowers when you're out looking at your orchids.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think people, as well as Jasmine listening with like your orchids, because it's all the orchids I find or I photograph are usually people telling me about orchids, but I have some dot points about that later down the track. But yeah, it's
not for orchids. This is not for orchids.
This is not for orchids, and this is another example of so that lens I have. I believe that's I think that was released in that version was released in 2000, I believe. So it was 22-year-old design lens. But again, when it came out, and for a long time, it was labeled as the sharpest lens ever produced by Canon for a while. It's just incredibly sharp lens. 2.8, which is the aperture, means it's quite good in low light. 300 mil is not something so that helps you see further, but it's not a focal length that people would use for tiny birds, for example. That's more like your 500 or 600 millimeter. But to me, it was about two things when I bought that lens. It was about what I could afford at the time, and a bit of versatility, because although I do like photographing birds a lot, I like photographing larger mammals and other things as well. And so this offered me, because it was optically so good, what I've done over the years, I've used that lens, which again will surprise a lot of purists, but everyone has sort of different expectations out of like sharpness and things. But because that lens is so sharp to start with, I used to put my ×2 extender, and basically that extended the focal length to 600 millimeter. I would lose light and a bit of autofocus speed, but it would provide me with that flexibility. And also, when I first started, when I first bought that lens, I had to go back to when you were saying APS-C, which is a crop sensor. And so you put that lens on a crop sensor camera, and depending on the brand, it actually doesn't act as an effective 300 millimeter, but would act more as a 460 millimeter, things like that. So you would get more reach. Still at 2.8. And another example of an old lens, the main drawback of that lens nowadays, because the version 2 came out and they've shaved a lot of weight out, because that's the thing, most of those you see like those big white lenses and fresh, they're so good optically, even like a lot of the lenses from like this one from 22 years ago, optically, they're excellent. But what they can do and improve is usually on the weight and on the size. And so the new one, the version 2 of that lens, is way lighter than that.
I was going to ask you, how much does that weigh?
This one, I believe it's either 2.5 or 3.5 kilo.
Yeah, so
something.
It's significant.
It's significant.
Yeah, which is always part of the trade-off that you have to make, especially if you're traveling. How much can you either carry, like if you're trekking, and the other thing is, how much can you afford to pay for in excess baggage? Because I'm sure that's always a consideration.
It often is, and but it's depending on, like you see I see those photos of people like shooting for huge production, which they will literally have 50 plus like baggage, and when I've spoken to people where their excess luggage budget was in excess of $30,000 for a shoot, just on excess baggage, that sort of things. I'm not at that point. We're not talking about that, but I'll answer shortly. But it will also be, I think there'll be a lot of people interested in a dedicated sort of chat about all the tricks that you can do and how to adjust everything to be able to fit everything. Basically, I can give you a few quick tips, but it's not always possible. But I might not make friends here. If you go on a photo trip somewhere, photographers always have a fair bit of kit, and things will always be like borderline on the way, things like that. Don't fly Jetstar if you can. Yeah. It's because they will wait for you at the door of the boarding with their little scale, and there's no way they'll let you in without weighing everything.
But also, you're likely to get on your flight to Los Angeles, and they'll send your baggage to Singapore. So
it can happen. I have avoided them as much as possible for that specific reason. I've had just for the weight side of things. It's just it's down the track. When you make your calculation, it's cheaper to get a ticket with another airline that's slightly more expensive. But then when you have your luggage, you have more cabin allowance. They're a bit more like relaxed and things. Very often, usually what's happened to me is if my bag is too heavy, which it often is, but there is some piece of kit that can get checked in. Some you always want to have, at least for work, when you're working, I need to have everything enough in my backpack, in my carry-on to do the job. It might be difficult, it might not be like perfect, but I need to have enough that if I get there and everything is lost, at least I have my backpack and what I'm wearing on me, and I can finish the job just with that, which means one set of audio equipment, like a body, a lens, the computer, and that. So that's usually sort of always a borderline on the weight. But often it's about chatting with the people, because very, very often people are very rational. They're like, because even if you don't have a lot of equipment, like that lens is heavy and big, and they're like, oh, you have to put things under, and you open the bag and they're like, okay, there is just 2 cameras, a laptop and a lens. It's obviously worth a lot of money. And so what they usually tell me is just, that's why I always leave a strap on my camera when I travel,
and
because
put it around your neck.
Put it around your neck. They're like, look, put it around your neck, and then it doesn't get it. That's what I always get advised by the people at the check-in. Put it around your neck. It's fine. It is what it is. And then it gets a bit uncomfortable, but it's okay. I would rather that.
I think Jasmine's comment is a bit similar there too, like sling your pack over one shoulder and pretend it's not heavy, so that doesn't get counted on you in your luggage allowance, and just go for it. And Jasmine making sure that neither of us is going to ever get any sponsorship from Jetstar, because Jasmine says quite categorically no Jetstar.
She would have a lot of experience in traveling with photo equipment, so I would listen to that advice. But it's just, again, I sat down, did the math, and looked at options, and it's the little things, the little amounts, because now a lot of airlines are competitive, and the little bits you sort of save just make everything more difficult for you as a photographer, make everything more difficult for a range thing. You have more risk associated to your travel and transit time. And so I've made my choice which airline I go when I go back to the same destinations. I always look at what their policy are on the luggage. Qantas has quite a large allowance for a cabin. I know they're always like on the more expensive side on tickets. Sometimes they're not. It's always worth shopping around and not just being like, I'm going to go Jetstar because I want to get to my destination as cheaply as possible. Right. It's sometimes it's all you can do, but I've had flights where I was in a 7-seater and they've told me you have 2 kilos allowance on your lap. So all I had was like at that time I had like a Canon cinema camera, just like the cinema camera on my lap, and everything was like put on there. But it's a bit different because you can see the people putting it, and you can be sure that 7-seater aircraft is going to the right island because you're in it. You can talk to the pilot. The pilot is right in front of you. You can be like, "Are we going to this island?" So
very good, very good. Well, before we get off gear and into talking about the good stuff, all the shots, in your current setup, which we've been talking about. Actually, we haven't talked about the second body, have we? So we'll just talk about that. But what I wanted to ask, Nick, is there anything that you're sort of not happy with or that you're planning to change in your current range?
Well, my trusted 1DX Mark II will take a well-deserved retirement lifestyle and be replaced by the Canon EOS R3 in about 2 hours.
Hot off the press. We're breaking news.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I've tested a lot of cameras in the past 6 months, a lot, like all brands around, and the hassle of changing system aside, like this camera, I've tried it and has really, I liked it so much that I decided not to test another one that I thought could work for me. But this is basically the 1DX, in a mirrorless version with all the new technology advancement 2022 can bring, basically, and it is much lighter. So it has the grip, but it's just a kilo, which is quite incredible when you have it in hand for something that has such a good ergonomics.
Now here's a question just for you, Nick.
Yep. Asking for a Canon friend, what
Canon
would you
friend.
recommend in really large lenses, more than 300? It'll be so now the camera that we have on the screen, and so that's the new Canon system, which is the RF system. So the lenses designed for RF do not work on for example on my 1DX, but the opposite works. Basically, all the previous lenses that have been designed on the EF system for the past 30 odd years with one simple adapter work on the new cameras, and they work very well, which is great. So I'm not sure what Canon camera your friend has, but in really large lenses, the Canon 500mm f4 version 2 has been a staple of bird photographers, trusted and tried over the years. It's a sort of good lens for a range of other wildlife. People that are really into the smaller birds and things that are far will go to 100mm extra, which is the 600 f4, and both of those, but we're talking very large and expensive lenses. But they're the two main past 300. You have a 400 2.8, but I feel like your question was more like the really large ones, so 500, 600. They do have the EF version 800mm 5.6.
I've seen those massive 800s
So the 800, I've used it for a while. I have a friend who has one. He let me use it for about a week. I had a great time. Okay, she wants huge ones. Thank you. All right. Well, the good thing is that if she gets an 800mm f5.6, which isn't sold new anymore, but you can find around the $10,000 mark secondhand, she will not need a gym membership, because it is great optically, but it's an old design, all materials. It is heavy. Very, very heavy lenses, and this one. So they have done all those three lenses in the new RF system. They've done the 400 to 8 RF, the 600 f4 RF. So she should be looking either, if she wants really huge ones, I would say something that is sensible and huge, which I'm not sure if it works together, but sensible and huge. Probably she should be looking at the 600 f4 version 3. Because for 600 it's quite light. Again, that's what I was saying before, like most advances in those lenses, they've been optically great for decades. So now they're just getting lighter and more compact as everything advances. And 600 f4, she should be looking at that. The version 3 is really light for a 600. Whether it's a RF mount for the new camera, I don't know what she has, or the EF, they're both really good.
Fantastic. All right, let's move on to some of the good stuff, Nick. Some of the shots that you let me show, and let's treat them this way. You can tell us a little bit about it. We'll have to sort of race through a little bit, but if you can remember, tell us what they were taken with, and why do you particularly like the shot? Now, let's start with the tropic bird.
All right, tropic birds. This was taken on Reunion Island, which is a French overseas territory, roughly 800 kilometers off the east coast of Madagascar. So I grew up in Madagascar, but now my parents live on this French island, and so when I go back to see my parents, that's where I go. And the bird emblem of the island is the white-tailed tropic birds, and they're quite ubiquitous. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I'm getting game with my words. There's a lot around. They're
the seagull of Reunion Island, basically.
Sort of. Yes. But a very beautiful, graceful, incredible bird to watch until they're trying to land. I've rarely seen something so hilarious than watching a tropic bird for like nearly an hour trying to land. Every time it had a perfect angle and speed, but just decided something wasn't right until after nearly an hour, just crash landed into like right on the side of its nest. They just don't seem to be great at landing on their cliffs. They nest on cliff faces and things, but they're gorgeous birds. Their call is very, very distinct. So it's always like, there's some around. Where my parents live, there's like a little cliff just in front of a balcony. And a few years, there's been some tropic birds nesting there, which somehow managed to survive despite all the roaming pet cats. around, and it's a great bird. It's a great bird. I took that photo while I was hiking on the south coast there with my parents, lugging my 1DX 300s and 2x extender in the tropical heat, and we're walking on this like sort of volcanic cliff, surrounded by a lot of pandanus. And yeah, the bird they did a few passes over the swell, so that sort of background is the Indian Ocean, and I really like that position because it really shows the streamer, which are the streamers, the two feathers at the back. Now I'm blanking on the name of those two tiny feathers.
The primaries, and
the
primary feathers look fantastic there, and
the two tiny ones that are coming out in French, we call them. I think it's in English it might be alula. The alulas, those two tiny bits that are like sort of hanging on at the joint, sort of popping out. They have a specific name for these feathers. So yeah, as you were mentioning, the primaries, the streams, everything is sort of like on display here. It worked quite well. So it was a nice. I spent a lot of time with my parents photographing those birds.
And did you sell that one?
No, this one.
No?
No, another one. I have a good friend that we went to high school together on the island. He works in IT in Paris, and he has a tattoo of one of the birds. He bought another one from the same day, but a different style bird, smaller in frame, against like the different area where there was no swell, so deep blue background of the Indian Ocean again, but without the swell. That one got printed, framed, and sent to Paris.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. Next, the bear.
Do you know what it is?
I'm going to say that is a sun bear.
Sloth bear.
It's a sloth bear. I should have noticed. I should have seen those claws. Yes.
Yeah, sun bear would have shorter fur, way shorter fur as well. But yeah, it's a sloth bear photographed in Sri Lanka, and quite an incredible animal when you start looking into it. Quite a fearless animal. A lot of guides and forest ranger you talk to. I've had various discussions with people saying that they would rather sort of encounter a leopard or something like that than a sloth bear. Very, very fearless. If you look on YouTube, sloth bear versus tigers, there is some amazing encounters and sequences. And the sloth bear is much smaller than a tiger, but it will stand on its back leg and really, really go for it. It's quite an incredible critter, and it's really cute to see as well. I've only seen it, never photographed it yet. But when female has cubs, they just piggyback. They just like literally just climb and hold on to like two clumps of fur. And so there's often you'll see photos of like the two little ones like just hanging onto the fur and like looking to the side. It's quite a stunning animal. And in this one, it was a bit of in terms of the photo, it's one of those times where I had my 300 with the extender, it's a prime lens, so I can't zoom in or out. It is what it is in terms of the focal length. And at the end of the day, leaving the park, and you have to leave it by a specific time. It's very like regimented. And we're like in the car, so we slow down because it was just foraging on the side, and we slow down to give it space so it could cross if it wanted to. And then in my head, I was like, well, I just got a portrait when it was in the forest. What do I do? Because it's always like if I take the extender away, it's gonna go further away. It's always how it goes. And but if I leave it on, maybe it's I was just like, what's gonna happen? It's like, no, I was just watching the bear. There's two cars there. We just like the engines were turned off. We just like taking photos, watching it. Was great. And I was like, look, I'll just do it because it was quite dark already. So I was like, I want that 2.8 to let a lot of light and blur the background if it happens. And it just happened. I took the extender off, put the lens by itself on the camera, and it crossed in front of us. And I took like a series of photos as it crossed, and that's the one that's my favorite because it's looking at us and you can see those claws coming out.
Yeah, and it looks like it's quite a leisurely stroll. It was cruising.
It was aware of our presence, but it was certainly not running around, just looking at us passing by. It was in Sri Lanka, and very used to cars being around. Another image from Sri Lanka, which is an incredible destination for a range of things. the wildlife photography is really, really, really amazing. The critters are just so good. It's to see leopards, and it's one of the best places in the world. And this is one of my favorite leopard. If my memory is right, that's YF32, also nicknamed Arya, and after Game of Thrones, but quite a young female. I think just left her mom maybe like maybe a year before that. My memory, I have all it in my notes, and I'm in no way an expert on big cats, but I'm trying to remember what I was chatting with my friend who studies them, and had all the information, because I know the code name and the name of the leopard, because they've been following a lot of the leopards, and they look at the pattern of the rosettes and dots to be able to identify them. So that's why we knew who she was and sort of how old. But yeah, another incredible. There's such a beautiful cat, so sleek.
This shot really works for me, Nick, because the vertical axis, if you go through the centre of the nose, works with that trailing leg and that dense patterning on the crown, and with the angle from the eyes, each eye coming in, and then to the nose and the mouth with that Y shape. So it's not symmetrical, but it makes you feel like it's symmetrical. It's just got
and it draws you in. Yeah, it sort of like draws you in. The side, I was really, I think for that photo, I probably took a sequence of maybe 50, 60 photos of her walking on that trail towards like that. And I settled on that for this specific reason that you were just describing, that it's really sort of like, it was the best position. It was drawing the viewer to the eye. She's sort of looking towards the dead space, which is like a little bit wider where she's going. But also it was the perfect sort of position, because of the light that's coming through was sort of like backlighting her paw and the side of her face. So I really like that.
And the way that the light falls, and with the way the fur has fallen along the length of her back, is really interesting too. Like it, while your eye is immediately drawn to that spot immediately below her nostrils, your eye then moves along her back. It's a really, really interesting image.
Yeah, it's just, they're so gorgeous. They're just so like sort of sleek, agile, moving without effort. It's incredible seeing a big cat in the wild. And I've only seen like a few species, but yeah, leopards are definitely up there. It's quite an amazing animal.
Are you ready for the next one?
Bring it on. This one. That's the one-horned rhinoceros, or Rhinoceros unicornus. This one was in the Terai area of Nepal, so the south of Nepal, in the lower-lying areas, in the Terai forests, and Chitwan National Park, which is a place that's world renowned for people to come and photograph these critters amongst others. And that was on my second trip there, and one of my best encounter, but also one where the heart raced a little bit, just a little bit more than usual. Because again, that's with my 300 2.8, but with the 1.4 extender, so not a 600 mil. That's virtually uncropped. And what happens is that, so if you see the background, there's the background is the grass, and so at night, you have the town where you stay, you have the lodges, the village, and you have like the Rapti River, the main river system that goes through there, and that sort of makes the boundary into the national park, and you get like a little boat and go across with your guide for the day, sort of thing, and you can also like go down the rapids and then hike back through the park to the village, and often at night the rhinoceros will cross the river and go and have a little snack in people's veggie patch or backyards or things like that. It can happen. There's footage of them being a bit lost in the village as well. But what happened there is that we caught one on its way back into the national park. And but because the river has a fair bit of current flowing through, and you're like on this dugout canoe with like one of the guys has a pole to try and sort of navigate you, but usually you get in and you sort of like follow the current. It's really hard to go backwards or turn, but we saw it arrive, so they tried to place the boat for us to photograph it, but by doing so we actually beached the canoe in the middle onto like sort of like a gravel bank, and we were stuck there, and this happened to be exactly where the rhino wanted to go. And so I could see that it was making everyone a little bit, it was like the four of us, the two guides were quite uneasy trying to unstuck the boat. So I was already we all had like I guess an escape plan in case we had to, because they're pretty, you have to give them, it's a 2-ton giant that can sprint at 55 kilometers an hour with terrible eyesight, but great smell. Sense of smell. So you have to be a fairly, as with everything, you have to be respectful. You have to give them space. That's why we use long lenses. And but in the end, we got a bit tense. But then the boat sort of like dislodged, and we managed to like turn around in perfect timing as the rhino entered the water and then lifted his head a little bit. And that's why. So to go to the aesthetics of the image, what I really enjoyed is that you had the sort of like dry, wet parts of the rhino, the fur on the ear. There is some raven poop on its back as well. And all those little things on the high resolution file, you can see there's some flies around the horn, and see how like all the folds of the skin as well. It's quite incredible skin. They have those rhinos. It's quite something to see that species in the wild.
Yeah, the fringing of the hair on the ears and with the light passing through that is really interesting. Was this a trip that you were commissioned to do, or was it one that you did for pleasure?
So that was a personal trip.
Sightseeing.
This one.
Yep. Sightseeing. All right, let's bring up the next one.
Dear. Again, I think I'm gonna ask you for all the random critters like that, because I know you know your critters well. Do you know what that is? Well,
it's a gecko or it's a snake. I can't tell enough on the small screen that I was looking at it on. It has eyes like a gecko, I think. So am I right?
It's a gecko. Yeah. It's I know the scientific name. I believe it's a mossy leaf-tailed gecko. That's its common name. Yes. It's endemic to Madagascar. It's in the Europlatus genus, unless taxonomists are trying and have.
Well, they've probably changed it by now.
Probably changed it by now. But last time I checked, which was a while ago, it was a Europlatus. So it could be probably still Europlatus sicerae. And I'm going to go with the most incredible camouflage I've ever seen of any animal, because right now it's got its head lifted, but what they do is like you see all those like sort of fringing things on there, and just the color, it looks like a lichen. It's just incredible. And the first time that I got shown one in a national park in Madagascar, it took me like a solid minute. The person was pointing at it. It was just above me. And I was like, nope, I can't see it. I cannot see that animal. It was just incredibly camouflaged. It's and we have leaf-tailed geckos in Australia which camouflage really well as well, but this is next level. I've never seen any other animal camouflage so well in my life.
And these flatten themselves against the trunks of trees.
Everything has fringes, and they just get the texture of the tree. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
Fantastic. It's I think it's just all about the diagonals, the angles there that get you looking at it, and that eye is just amazing. The patterning on that eye is amazing.
And that was taken with that macro lens we were talking about before, that 32-year-old lens.
So there we go. You don't need something new. When did you take that shot, roughly, Nick?
That's Madagascar. Which trip was that? That's either 2000. That's 2016, I believe.
Okay. Cool. Okay. Now this one, I've called it cloud forest only because it's a forest with clouds, not actually in the cloud forest.
So that's so it's not cloud forest, but it's in the in the specific sense of it. But I put that in there because it's it's hard for me to. I always get asked, what's your favorite photo or favorite animal? I don't have it. It's impossible. Everything is tied to memories, trips, things, projects. This is from Borneo, and more specifically Danam Valley, which is the Malaysian part of Borneo in Sabah, and it's like this sort of viewpoint tower in the middle of the rainforest, and Danam Valley has the core area is this primary, incredibly tall, incredibly amazing rainforest, and basically sitting on that tower before sunrise and then watching the sun, or like the blue hour when I took that photo at sunrise, and you can see the forest breathe. You can see those clouds like that mist fog slowly move through, and you can hear the calls of the gibbons like carrying really far, and you can hear great Argus pheasants and all these other things doing. It's incredible, and that image is just. And then in terms of the composition, I liked all those lines and just those gigantic trees poking through. It's again, that's probably one that's maybe more ingrained into my memory and that sort of thing. That's why I like it so much, because it was such an incredible moment. But it's just stunning. Rainforest like that is just stunning.
What I see, apart from the cloud and the canopy, or the canopies in there, is that it grids nicely into thirds vertically, but also into quarters if you use the horizontal lines. So it's technically a really cool picture.
It's I agree. I think I was drawn by those different lines, layers, and things.
Yeah, and of course, then you have the diagonals as well, which work left to right and right to left. So
with the two at the top,
that's right.
Great place.
It's again, it's a cool shot, and it takes a special eye to actually notice it, because most people would probably be walking, going. And not even notice it. All right, they're all overseas shots. Western Australia. And here's an Australian one.
And I chose something for Australia. I chose something that I assumed not. It's not the first. That's an ornate cowfish, and I do not believe that's the first thing people think about when they think about Australian endemic wildlife. But it is. In Australia, it's probably my favorite Australian endemic fish. It is absolutely gorgeous. The colors are off the charts, and it's just this incredible. And I had again a great experience. It's such a curious little fish. We're just looking at the front of the dome of the camera, coming around, and that again, and like with a lot of shots, when you go to places that you don't really know, and underwater photography isn't something I do like a huge amount of, but I'm lucky that I have like friends that do that, and I wouldn't have gotten that image because credit where credit is due without my friend Chelsea Habish, which is an incredible underwater photographer based in Adelaide. Her work is just absolutely stellar. And on that day, she let me borrow her whole equipment. So we did 3 dives together, and she was just showing me all the wildlife, and had told me about the ornate cowfish and how it would behave, and what to do, what to not do, to let it sort of really come close and let it do its thing. And without all of that thing, which it goes back to the early discussion of like exchanging with people that know the wildlife. It wouldn't have worked, but yeah, it was an absolute pleasure to photograph the patterns, and everything is just, I love the things. And it's something, because people, you think about the Southern Ocean, which is like, south of Australia, as being like rugged, cold, and things, but it's actually so like rich. There is so many species. I love diving off the south coast of Adelaide, because it's in a way that it's easy diving, as you just get to the piers with your car. It's not very deep. There's a lot of things to look at if you sort of patient and know what to sort of want to take the time to look at things, and you have little gems like that in just under the jetties. It's absolutely incredible.
Well, there's probably a whole another episode talking about underwater photography, and I'm guessing you had to borrow the gear. You weren't that familiar with it, so we can talk about adaptability.
It was, yeah, because it was she has different gear now. What I use then is her backup gear now, but it's like a Sony, a small Sony APS-C camera. So like, I would say not a huge full frame or anything, but just great images already. Then it's a model from like, I think 2012 or something, 10 years old. And I used it maybe like 5 years later. Great lights, and also like great teaching on her side on the behavior. And I think it helps as well that I really enjoy gear. I like testing new cameras. I like to find the right things for the right job. And through that, although I didn't shoot with Sony on a regular basis, I was pretty quick to pick it up. Usually you put a camera in my hands and I can sort of work it just from the fact that I've used so many brands over the years.
Well, we'll definitely talk another time about underwater photography. I think that's just too much to jump into now with the time we got left. So let's look again, more Australia.
There we go. Little bemus running in the sunset. That was in Western Queensland. That was a very long time ago, but I love that image. Where was I? I was on just west of Cunnamulla, and it was just great. Just sunset, emus running through.
Cunnamulla, mate. Yeah, it's a great country. Obviously, that was a dry year. It had not just rained. Typical outback kind of colours. Mm-hmm. Again, that beautiful horizontal lines that break the shot up nicely into thirds too. Again, Nick. So beautiful composition. What would a photography chat about Australia be without a Roo?
Mm-hmm.
And an old man Roo.
And actually, that's what I like about that image. It had the All Mate vibe. It's a young Joey. It's a young red Roo. Yeah.
Look at the color on the face for that.
It's the markings were absolutely incredible. And so the story there's a few things behind that image. First, so I took that image last year, but it's not digital. It's a film photo.
Okay.
So it's a film. It's shot on Kodak Gold 200 with my I have a Canon EOS 1, so some sort of 1D version, but not D because not digital. But it's a 30-plus-year-old film camera that I use on a irregular basis. But and this young Roo is a rescue. So I was with carers in the Channel Country in Western Queensland, and it was one that was old enough to be in the sort of soft release pen, and so I was just sitting outside with a cuppa and watching that Roo, and the fact that it was pretty close like that, and the light was gorgeous. It was just looking at me, and so I had 300 2.8, which was perfect to make that to do that framing and to have that blurred background at 2.8. I focused on the eyes, but being filmed, I did my best to focus on the eye. You never really exactly know how things will pan out. We're very lucky with the digital cameras, but and because the light Kodak Gold has some very warm tones, very warm yellow tones, and I was like, it's going to work well there. And but yeah, absolutely love that those markings. That he was nicknamed Noah because he was brought in after the floods. He was found after the floods.
Well, I think he probably had a difficult time because for such a young animal, he's got very old soul look about him.
There was something special about his look. Yeah, it is incredible. I just wanted to throw something non-digital in the mix as well.
Yeah, no, really good. Well, next time we talk, I think we might revisit that picture. I've got a few things to say about it, but time's going to beat us today. I wanted to talk about this one because this is a great bird photography photo. I think this is what a lot of bird watchers want to get when they are going out on a trip. An iconic bird in an iconic action, not so much an iconic pose, but an iconic action. So tell us about this one.
Where do I start with wedgies? It's just this, as you say, many people like want to see them, want to photograph them, and I understand why. It's just it exudes power. There's no other way. Like it's just incredible bird of prey, and so in this instance, it was as well along 2017. I took that photo on interesting into like because we talk about gear. I'll just quickly talk about gear first. It's shortly after I went on a trip to Madagascar with 10 of my Australian friends. I took them around to see my granddad and then show them some of the wildlife of Madagascar. And on the last flight out of Madagascar, because we're talking about like luggage and things, and because of the amount of gear I have, I can't take everything like in my bag because it would literally be 25 kilos, and that there's no way you can do that. Anyway, so I had my 300s and my tiny, at the time, Canon's first mirrorless like iteration, which was like very sort of early days mirrorless, very different than what you would get now. And my 300 and my drone in my backpack, and everything that was in my check-in was stolen in the airport in Madagascar during transit. So when I landed in Réunion, the bag was half broken and everything was gone. And so all I had when I did that trip shortly after, where I was doing a bird survey on the Oodnadatta track in South Australia, sort of like linking South Australia towards Ulara in the Northern Territory, and yes, so all I had, that camera now resells probably for, I don't know, $200, something along those lines. It's very, very simple early days, like 5 images per second. Every time you take a photo, the screen goes black, the image goes black. It was difficult, but it was such a good moment with those two wedgies that that's when your mind goes like in hyperfocus. That's all I had. I had the good lens, but like a very, very entry level camera. And I always use that as an example to be like, the lens is very important on a camera, and you can produce very, very good thing even with entry level cameras because the sensors are good. You just got to live with them with what the little drawbacks. But yeah, to go back to that image, we just seen some wedges in the distance, but when we stopped, they flew off. They were very far, so I just walked on the dune to see what they were looking at, and then saw there was a carcass not far. It's like, oh, that's probably what they were. They were not on the carcass, but further up. And then as I'm walking, I'm like, all right, well, let's get back to the car. As I'm walking back to the car, I just heard like a bit of noise, and I looked back, and out of nowhere, because I only saw one to start with, and there's another one literally above me going the other direction. And it's like, whoa, I was so taken, it was so close. And so I just turned around, stopped, and started like taking photos that it turned, and then it flew in front of me. And then I could see there wasn't that dune wasn't there yet. It's sort of like it was more, the dune wasn't across the whole landscape, but I could see where it was going. And I was like, oh, it's gonna go and try and land in that sort of bush, because it had that sort of like slow moving thing, and it didn't seem like I was pretty far, because I had this 300 with the time to extender, and that little camera was a crop sensor camera, so I had in my hand effectively nearly 1,000 millimeter, and hence I was just like, I just need to nail a few frames there and just track it, because it's hard to track birds at that sort of that focal length, because things are really sort of narrow field of view. It's hard to follow. Anyway, so I just sat and really like watched it approach and kept it in the viewfinder until that happened. And so I have like a few series of shots from that moment. I have the one before as well, where it's just gliding past, and it just all worked. I did because I could have moved, but I've really, again, it's a lot of like anticipation, and I was like, all right, I feel like it's going to go there. That looks like the only place where it's going to want to land, if it's going to land, and everything came together. It sort of like dropped the legs, and I was like, oh, I was amazed, absolutely amazed.
So people might say that was luck, but it's you understanding what the bird was likely to do.
There's always luck involved, but there is there is a lot of that sort of like mental preparation behind it, and it can only be a split second. But your knowledge leading to that point will make that split second the deciding factor into like if you get like a really nice frame or just something else. It's quite nice. Another tropic bird this time because Rainian Island is a volcanic island, so there's a lot of volcanic cliffs, and we got very sunburned that day. I have a behind the scenes photos. Me, my mom, and my dad sitting on the rocks watching the birds, and I was trying for like a long time to get that specific shot. And because I got a few without the stream, and I really wanted the streamer somewhere in the image. So we spent like a long time, and we were also on a little volcanic beach made of volcanic rock. So it's all black and extremely hot, and just the heat. We all got sunburned that day, but I really like the contrast between that. And I was adjusting the shutter speed so that I would try and get the head and most of the body in focus, but a bit of movement on the wing. That's the only photo of the whole day where I managed to do that.
So with that, it looks black and white, but
it's not.
It hasn't been processed in black and white. You haven't filtered it that way.
No.
That's actually the light conditions, the volcanic rock in the background, and you've got a bird that is black and white, pretty much, with a dull yellow bill. So, that's a really, really, really great image. I had to look at it a couple of times before I worked out what it was while I was preparing those, Nick. So very, very, very cool. Well, time's getting away from us. So for Photography Friday, I've still got a bunch of things on the list to talk about, especially when we were going to talk about ethics, and I was going to talk about
we could do a whole series on that.
Well, we'll certainly do a whole episode on ethics, particularly with that thing I sent you yesterday that I saw on Twitter, which has become a big issue for particular tour areas in India. But it's not. Let's not pretend that the way people approach and assault animals with different techniques, it's not an Indian problem. So certainly don't think that. We might give people, because there's still people watching us, if there's a final thing you would like to add or a question you would like to pose. Thanks, Naomi. We've just got some love, and we got a like. Thank Naomi and Jasmine. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Isn't that what they say, Nick?
That's exactly right. So I hope we answered Naomi's question on the for her friend in terms of her question earlier on. We'll try to address it. Yeah, there is definitely a 2470 f4 equivalent. Nikon, I don't have it on top of my head. There would be something equivalent. Sorry. Feel free, Naomi, to reach out to me as well, or to Grant, and he will direct you to me on my Instagram page. I'm happy to give you some advice on Twitter as well. Now on Twitter, it's LE_Rako. Someone.
There we are. The nickname. Well, okay, so that banner I've got there, Lurako, that's your Instagram handle.
That's my Instagram handle. So yeah, if you Naomi, because your second question for bird photography, what do you recommend? That it's quite it's depending on a lot of things. What Nikon body you have, what's the budget, what sort of things. So yeah, I feel like it's can't answer in straight in one go like that. I already have in my mind what's possible, like what's the best option, but I have to know more about what all those variables.
Yeah, and we'll just pop back to that. Thanks very much for that, Kangaroo Island TV.
You're welcome.
Jasmine's got a comment too. Oh, I'm glad it was super entertaining, because I really don't want this to be like those terrible bloody blah. Let's review some gear and whatnot on YouTube. Running right out of time. Naomi, thanks again for that comment. Thanks so much. It's been wonderful to hear and see fantastic photos. She'll get in touch. We'll be doing Photography Friday again, won't we, Nick?
We will, absolutely, we will.
I'll work out some dates with Nick, and Nick won't be the only person that I'll be talking with, but be a regular co-host. Running out of time, I'm Grant Williams. You can catch the Bird Emergency everywhere, and at Bird Emergency on Twitter. Nick Rakotopare, thank you so much for being part of Photography Friday.
My pleasure, always.
See you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.